Alan, why don't you bring him on? I know he's been a friend of yours, and he's contributed a lot to your show over the years.
That's right. This is my guy, Yossi Gozlan, NBA salary cap analyst, founder, host of the Third Apron. Yossi, thank you so much for joining us, my guy. I know you've been running around. It's a trade deadline, so it's very busy, but we appreciate the time.
No, thanks for having me on, Alan. It's good to always chat with you. Had some technical issues, but I made it work.
There you go. Thank you, my guy.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it, Yossi. Understand that you weren't crazy about this trade from the Kings' perspective. Why not?
So a couple reasons. Number one, it sounds like, based on the reporting that's been precursors to eventually trading Keon Ellis, maybe it could have gotten like a little more draft equity, and maybe those actual picks weren't really out there. But the other main issue is with one, like Hunter as a player. I'm not sure what exactly he's like. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he really necessarily makes sense for the Kings right now. And then in the long term, he makes a good amount of money, at least next year. After that, they could extend him. They could maybe give him something a little bit less. But now they have a whole nother issue where they made the roster more expensive, and they're going to have to figure out how they're going to navigate this, because they have, crazily enough, one of the most expensive rosters in the league right now this year. So for next year. So I would expect they're going to do something about that. But I just think if there were maybe offers where they could have just gotten maybe some extra seconds and not taken back bad money, I think that would have made a little more sense for Keon Ellis.
Yossi, just as far as the DeAndre Hunter flip, we compared it, or at least I compared it a little bit to what Brooklyn has done, what they did with Cam Johnson, and then getting a first for Cam Johnson. They had to take on Michael Porter Jr., but they could get something back for Michael Porter Jr. as well, as he's been playing really well. How realistic do you think that is? We were saying how they kind of reset the timeline a bit with a trade asset that other teams wanted, since they were running out of time with Keon Ellis.
It's possible they could maybe get something for Hunter next year. So the one way like I could see this working out is, I didn't like the DeRozan move when they acquired him a couple of years ago. I think a lot of the success that they've had in recent years, Harrison Barnes was the common denominator, just a really good fourth, fifth option who could play some defense. And maybe the Kings kind of realize that's what that they need, that type of guy. So like having him and Keegan Murray be those forwards, I think that makes sense for like any foundation. As far as it potentially being a future move to flip him later for something, it's possible. The Hawks were able to get pretty good value for Hunter last year. So we'll see, but he will be extension eligible this offseason. It sounds like the Kings just genuinely wanted him. They like him. Maybe people in the front office have scouted him back when he was younger. So maybe I would anticipate he'll probably stick around with the Kings for a while. The best thing they could do to increase his value is get him on a nice extension. I don't know what exactly that looks like, but if they could get him on something that maybe he's making a little bit less and it's low enough where like he'd be a great starter if he gets better, but also not too expensive if he has to come off the bench, I think that's the key. And then maybe 2-3 years from now, they could get positive value for him.
That's Yossi Gozlan, nice enough to join us, NBA salary cap analyst and founder, Third Apron. Yossi, obviously, as we've discussed here, we're not sure what they do with DeAndre Hunter. If they do something, we don't know when they do it. But in general, picking up a player of his caliber, and I know he's not having a great year by his standards, it strikes me as a little unusual for a team that we think is tanking to pick up a 28-year-old who's somewhat accomplished at this point of the rebuild. Would you agree with that?
I think it is. I think the main thing is that the Kings right now, with the worst record in the league, if they stay at this pace, then having the worst record in the league guarantees you a top 5 pick in the draft. And most of the players projected in the very top are wings. So chances are the Kings will be able to get someone like one of the top wings in the draft, in which case did it really make sense to bring in Hunter at that point? So Sounds to me like maybe this is kind of like a setting the culture type trade, which actually is pretty important for the Kings. Like, but everything else as far as the money, like how exactly he helps the team, which I'm not sure he's gonna like help them like in the short term. And then just overall, I think they should have probably gotten more value from the Cavs for helping them do this. Like, we can argue we can argue who's better, Ellis or Hunter, but for the Cavs, Ellis made a lot more sense to them, especially the contract, and they saved a bunch of money. Don't think the Kings were really compensated enough for that.
Yossi, I'm not sure if this is a very confusing question or pretty straightforward, but can you explain the Dario Saric piece of this deal? He goes to Chicago. The Kings had to also give up a second rounder, and then the Cavs had to give up a second rounder. Was that the Kings just, like you said, they're a bit more expensive now, so they had to get off of Saric immediately? Because my first thought was, well, he's expiring. The whole idea was he could help facilitate something, and you gave him away and also had to give up a draft pick. So I was a bit confused on that one.
So because Hunter makes as much money as he does, they needed, and the Kings are already pretty close to the luxury tax, they needed to send out even money to make the money work without exceeding the tax. So they did that with the 3 players that they sent out. The thing is, the Cavs, they just didn't want to take on Saric, so they could save a lot more money. So they sent the second to the Bulls, and then the Kings also sent the second to the Bulls to have them beat the facilitator. So that's all it really was. It could have been a 2-team trade, but then also the Cavs would have had to then throw in another player because then they're exceeding 15 players. So it just made it easier to get a third team to take Sarge.
Mm-hmm. Yossi Gozlan, nice enough to join us, as we said, from Third Apron. Yossi, it's always been in the history of the NBA tricky to trade older players making a lot of money, especially when they're not great defensively. That's where the Kings are now, as we know, with a handful of players. Does the newer CBA and all the talk of aprons, which we don't understand like you do, but is it even tougher now than it used to be because of the new CBA?
I think team building is a little tougher. There are more restrictions as far as what means you have access to sign players. But at the same time, if you're not a big spender, then it's actually easier. You have more exceptions, or there's more flexibility. You can take on more money. Right now, like the Kings and many other teams right now, most teams are like right up against either the luxury tax or an apron or some sort of threshold that they just don't want to cross or can't cross. So I think right now that is more so the issue slowing down the market. Every team has spent as much as it wants to, and that makes trade it a little harder to execute, which is why we're seeing most likely 3-4 team constructs where someone who has more money to spend can take on a little more, like the Bulls just did. So the deals will still get done. Teams could still figure out whatever it is they need to do. It just takes extra steps.
Yossi, we're running out of time until the trade deadline, and we were trying to figure out who a team could just go impulse buy for. And I'm looking at 2 guys, okay? I'm looking at Malik Monk, who I understand he's got the 3 years, and I'm looking at DeMar DeRozan, who he's been called before a pseudo-expiring contract because only $10 million are on his contract next season. Do you think either of those guys right now, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of smoke, but as we get closer to the trade deadline, some of these teams that are trying to contend, do you see either of those guys being in a conversation where maybe it's been overblown how bad their contracts are and a team saying, you know what, why don't we just bring in DeMar and then we'll have to pay him $10 million next season, but we can do whatever. We can move on from him from there. And on the DeMar piece specifically, I've referenced you before because a lot of people have been talking about the buying out DeMar after the trade line. And I remember the last time you were on with us, you talked about how it takes 2 to tango there. So I know it's a loaded question, but we can just focus on what team might be impulse buy, and if DeMar DeRozan is still on the team after the trade deadline, how realistic is a buyout?
So I think Malik Monk is pretty good. I think the way his contract is being touted around is a little overblown. It's just that a lot of guards right now, the value of guards has dropped in recent years, especially this year. I could see the Wolves maybe being interested if they can't get Giannis or any of their top targets. They could make a deal for Monk.
Mhm.
I kind of like the fit there, and the Kings can mainly take back expiring contracts. Maybe they could be interested in Rob Dillingham. I suppose that would be the main thing coming back. The Clippers, if they're willing to take back a little bit of long-term money, because their whole thing is they want to have cap space over the next few years. If they wanted to just, get someone who can not exactly replace Norm Powell, but do like some of the things that he brought for them last year, I think that would help them a lot. So like maybe a Bogdanovich swap straight up, Kings get expiring money there and help with their tax situation next year. As for DeRozan, I think bringing in Hunter is it's kind of indicative that the writing was already on the wall for DeRozan, but I think now it's a little more, and especially with his partial guarantee for next year. Because of that, I don't think he's going to agree to a buyout now. But as we get closer to hit the non-guaranteed portion of his contract next year, it will be a little easier to move him now. So I don't know if there's a team out there that wants him for competitive reasons, but maybe there's like a bigger trade where the Kings get someone they want. They send out DeMar and maybe like some second round picks, and maybe there's a team like the Nets or the Jazz who can take on a lot of money. They take him on and deal with the contract later. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I feel like chances are the Kings will do something with at least one of those guys by Thursday.
Yossi, I happened to hear you when you were on Allen's show a few weeks ago, and you talked about DeRozan and the buyout, and you explained it better than anyone I've heard. I know a lot of fans, we hear all the time from fans that say, just buy out DeRozan. And I'm wondering if you just mentioned it, could you explain again why, from DeMar DeRozan's standpoint, he would not want to accept that at this particular time?
So let's say you're a player on an expiring contract. So on the Kings, there's not really anyone quite like that, but someone I would keep an eye on. Let's say, hypothetically, CJ McCollum. Let's say he gets traded again, and then he goes to a bad team, and they don't really need him. So it kind of makes sense for him to agree to a buyout, so he could go to a better situation when he has no money at all into next year. So DeMar DeRozan's got the non-guarantee for next year. Still got 1 year, but it's non-guaranteed, and it's partially guaranteed for $10 million. There's times in the NBA when a player like that could end up getting more of that money guaranteed, if not the whole thing, in order to facilitate a trade. So the example I used when I last discussed this with you, Allen, was Chris Paul. Almost 3 years ago now, when he was traded from the Suns to the Wizards for Bradley Beal, he only had $15 million of his $30 million salary guaranteed, and he ended up getting an extra $10 million of it guaranteed to help make the salaries work for Beal. And then he ended up just getting the whole thing guaranteed. So any player with a non-guarantee or a team option, like Lonzo Ball is another example. He's got a team option for next year. I think there's a good chance the Cavs trade him at the trade deadline. And because he's got the team option, you would think maybe he gets bought out. No, he's probably not going to agree to it, just to hold out for the chance that maybe it gets picked up. He gets an extra $10 million to be in a trade. So that's probably why DeMar won't agree to anything right now. He'll probably ride out the year. And then, once you get to the offseason, if he doesn't get traded in the, before his contract becomes fully guaranteed, then maybe the team will just waive him. He gets a little bit of money and he'll move on.
Yossi, Domantas Sabonis is a name that's being brought up with the Toronto Raptors. A lot of people think that Jakob Poeltl contract is not great, and that might be some of the holdup there as those conversations intensifies. How do you see Domantas Sabonis as a value? Nowadays, nobody wants the quote-unquote long-term money. Domantas Sabonis is playing a little bit. He's missing some games, but we know he's pretty healthy. They're just maybe trying to skirt around some of the big minutes. How do you view Domantas Sabonis and kind of his value in the league right now?
I would say he has like neutral to very slight positive value. The team that I'm always kind of keeping an eye on is maybe the Bulls want to get him. They mostly have expiring contracts to offer, and then maybe they trade one first-round pick. So that's kind of where I'm at, where maybe a slight positive value, just to give the Kings a little incentive to trade him. As far as that Raptors offer, yeah, I think that Jakob Poeltl extension he got over the summer was pretty unnecessary. It feels like they kind of jumped the gun on things where he still had 2 years remaining on his contract. I'm not sure what they were getting ahead of by giving him all that money early. So if I'm the Kings in the position that they're at right now, I'm not necessarily against taking on that contract. They just need to be like fairly compensated for it. Like if we're talking a Pirtle and I guess RJ Barrett type framework, both those players have, but and Barrett also has another year left on his contract. I think I'm asking for at least 2 first-round picks at a minimum, and maybe a couple other of their young players, like they've got Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter. I would need like a good amount of sweeteners to do that. So I'm not totally opposed to it as long as they get the right draft compensation.
Yossi Gozlan, before we let you go, sir, like I said, we appreciate your time. Before we brought John, I was talking about who got the better player in the deal, and I was disagreeing with something that you had said on your pod, and I just wanted to give you a chance to, I think there's a lot of Kings fans who probably agree with you. Why do you think Keon Ellis is the best player in this deal, and that the Cavs, in that sense, may have won this deal?
So I think as far as this season, it seems like Keon Ellis has been a little underutilized, but at the same time, there's definitely some fair criticisms to why he hasn't been getting as much playing time. So I'm sure like where he really is somewhere in the middle. So I think that if Keon Ellis, like he's not a guy who's going to jump out on the box score, but if he can become the impactful 3-and-D player that many expect him to be, and like the flashes he's shown with the Kings, then he's a lot more valuable to a contender like the Cavs than Hunter, where Hunter, he's a good wing. He shoots threes. The thing that got to me when I really started to like look into what is it about Hunter that is, that makes the Cavs wanted to get rid of him so much is that they traded a lot to get him with the expectation he's going to be this really good 3-and-D wing, but he hasn't really been that. And when there were rumors that the Lakers might bring him in for Rui, then I realized that's like what Hunter really is closer to. Like, not that there's anything wrong with Rui, but Rui's like a solid wing, not really helpful on defense. And Hunter, like for what the Cavs needed, Hunter wasn't really doing that. So if Hunter could just be like if the expectation is that Hunter can just be like a solid role player, you don't have to depend on him to close, just play maybe 18, 22 minutes a game. Hunter can do that. Versus with Ellis, he might not play even quite that much, but there are scenarios where the Cavs maybe get a little deep in the playoffs and they need to put him in closing lineups to guard another team's best guy or second best guy. So like for looking at it in those margins, I feel like Ellis is a little more valuable going forward.
Gotcha. Yossi Gozlan, NBA salary cap analyst, Third Apron. You got any questions about the cap and all that? He's your source, right, Allen? That's where you want to check him out on the internet.
That's right. Rising star when it comes to
Can I ask you
all things
can I ask you guys
capology.
one question?
Yes.
I have one question for you guys. Do you think that since they brought in DeAndre Hunter, that means they're out on Jonathan Kuminga?
I think so.
It looks like it. It looks like it looks like they might have been already. It looks like that was already just hanging by a thread. And from what we think we know, if the Warriors had interest in anybody, they might have had interest in Keon, but it was probably going to take a third team anyway. So it looks like, that we were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
Looks like we can finally put that to bed.
Yeah, I thought maybe the intention was to dangle DeAndre Hunter in front of the Warriors, but if the Warriors aren't interested in that, they're still holding out hope for Giannis, then I don't see them bringing in
I know
both.
Sam had said that he has not heard of any of that going on yet.
I don't want it to be over, Yossi, but it sounds like it's over, man. It's over.
Allen loves his Kuminga watch, but we may have to shut it down, Yossi.
All right. No, it's good to know because I just finally realized maybe getting Hunter means they're out on him, at least for now.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks,
You're very
Yossi.